Hello, beautiful people. It's Lulu. Welcome to the Lulu Essie podcast, where we do things differently. No editing, no polishing, no studio magic, just honest conversations that stay exactly as they happened. Today, I'm jumping right into it. I was on a Teams call the other day, presenting work I was actually really proud of, when this tiny voice in my head whispered, "But is it enough?" And just like that, all my confidence started to wobble and shake. In that moment, I was reminded of how often we do this to ourselves. Not just in January, not just at work, but everywhere in our lives. This constant, incessant questioning. Are we doing enough? Being enough? Growing enough? Are we thin enough? Do we have enough money? Have enough friends? Have a big enough following on our socials? On and on and on it goes. Last week, we talked about sprinkling magic into 2025 with a love letter, permission slips, and glimmers. And today we're diving into something deeper. Something that's been coming up in almost every coaching conversation I've had lately. This question of enoughness. And beauties, we're going to flip the script on it completely. We are going to change the narrative. Welcome to what I'm calling Enough-uary. And yes, I know that's not a real word, but stick with me, because by the end of this episode, you might find yourself using it too. We're going to explore what happens when we start from enough instead of always chasing after it. I told you last week that I hoped to give you both roots and wings, and we are going to do more of that today. You know, this not enough voice, it's sneaky, it's sharp, and God damn it, it is so bloody clever. It shows up in so many different ways, wearing so many different masks. I see it in my coaching conversations all the time. It's the designer who keeps tweaking their work late into the night, convinced it needs to be perfect before anyone sees it. Or the writer who has 3 half-finished projects because nothing feels quite good enough to share. I see it in the high achiever, the person always excelling, who's always chasing the next promotion, the next certification, the next milestone, because surely then they'll feel like enough. I even see it in parents, actually especially in parents, who are doing their absolute best, but still feel like they're not present enough, not patient enough. Yeah, well, just not perfect enough. And I see it in myself too. The creative director who, perhaps for all intents and purposes, is crushing it at work, but still feels like they're not innovative enough, not strategic enough, not leadership material enough. But here's what I've learned from both my own journey and from working with so many beautiful souls like you. The answer is not in doing more or being more. It's in something completely different. And that's exactly what we're going to explore today. Over the past few months, I've been developing something I call the Enough framework. Okay, hold the eye roll for just a moment. This framework isn't about fixing you or making you better. This enough framework is about recognizing and remembering that you are already enough. And I know I've spoken about this before, and I will speak about it again and again, because it's the truth. It's a truth. It's a truth that if we all lived it, our lives and the world would be a very different place. This truth is really simple. You are enough. Let me share this framework with you, letter by letter, because each piece of it, it's like a little key that unlocks something powerful within us. Okay, let's kick it off. The E in enough. E is for embrace where you are right now. Not where you want to be, not where you think you should be, but right here, in this moment, with all your contradictions, all your messiness, all your stuff, all your glory. The other day, I was listening to some of my early podcast episodes, and that not enough voice, well, I was going to say it started creeping in, but it didn't. It came bash through the door. Comparing my raw, unedited conversations to these highly produced shows. But then I remembered this rawness, this realness, it's exactly what makes our conversations here special. And I remembered the most important thing. It's enough. I'm enough. Just as I am. The Lulu Essie podcast is enough. Okay, N. N is for notice your not enough stories. Oh, and we all have them, don't we? Those stories we tell ourselves about not being successful enough, thin enough, beautiful enough, far enough along in our journey. But here's the magic. Just noticing these stories without trying to fix them or push them away, that's where our power begins. Just in noticing. And this leads us on to O. And N and O are tied together. O is for observe without judgment. And this is where it can get really interesting. And if I'm honest, this is also where it becomes a bit uncomfortable and sometimes feels a bit awkward. Because we're so used to jumping straight to fixing, to improving, to making better, to finding a solution. But what if we just watched, observed with openness and curiosity, not judgment? I was working with someone recently, this super talented, and I mean really talented writer, who had 3 different projects sitting unfinished on her laptop. Every time she'd open one, that voice would start, "This isn't good enough yet." And every time she heard that voice, she'd either try and force herself to write or close her laptop completely. But then we tried something different. We just observed. No fixing, no analyzing, no pushing, just noticing, observing when and how that voice showed up. And you know what happened? Just by observing without judgment, without trying to make it different, something started to shift. That voice got a little quieter. It was like turning down the volume. The pressure eased a little bit, because when we stop fighting with ourselves, when we just observe, that's when real change has space to happen. Yes, it gives real change the space to happen. I remember doing a personal development course in my early 20s, and something the trainer said during that course stuck with me. And we're talking about the same thing here, but in different words. He said, "What you resist persists." Think about that for a moment. When there is no resistance, no judgment, no pushing against, the voice starts to fade. It becomes silent. Yeah, this may take a bit of time, but the voice will fade. And sometimes it fades to silence. Okay, let's move on to you. U is for understand your patterns and triggers. And oh my goodness, don't we all have them? Those super specific moments, those particular situations that send us spinning into the not enough black hole. And it's a black hole that can suck us in whole. I was talking to a client recently, this incredibly accomplished person who'd just gotten a promotion they'd been working towards for a very long time. And you know what happened a few days after they got it? They were already looking up courses, certifications, trying to figure out what's next. Sound familiar? That's a pattern. That feeling of this achievement isn't enough. I need the next one and the next one. It's a thirst that just cannot be quenched. It's a hunger that cannot be satiated, an itch that we are just not able to scratch. And here's what's fascinating. Once we started looking at their patterns and triggers, this highly accomplished person realized that this wasn't just about work. This same pattern showed up in their home, in their relationships, even in how they planned their weekends, always needing to do more, be more, achieve more, to feel worthy, to feel enough. But here's the beautiful thing about understanding our patterns and triggers. Once we see them clearly, they start losing their power over us. It's like turning on a light in a dark room. Suddenly, what felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What felt like truth, we realize is only a story we've been telling ourselves, and we can always choose to tell ourselves a different story. And I really want to be clear here. I don't want to oversimplify this. I absolutely acknowledge that some patterns are deep-rooted. Sometimes they're rooted in trauma, maybe childhood trauma, and they may take time to unravel and work through. But it is all doable if we are willing and have help to see the stories we tell ourselves for what they are. Stories. And once we acknowledge that, even if we need help and guidance along the way, we can then write a different story for ourselves. Okay, G. G is for grace. And this might be the most important letter in our framework, because in a world that's constantly pushing us to be more, do more, achieve more, have more, buy more, get more, giving ourselves grace feels almost deliciously rebellious. Some people think that grace is about letting themselves off the hook, about lowering their standards, but that's not it at all. No effing way. Grace is about treating ourselves with the same kindness, the same understanding, the same compassion we'd offer a close friend, a child. It's about saying, I see you. I see you busting a gut. I see how hard this is, and you're doing just fine. Think about that designer we spoke about earlier, tweaking their work to all hours of the night. What if instead of pushing through, they gave themselves grace to rest, to come back fresh? What if grace isn't about giving up, but about giving ourselves space to breathe, to be human, to be gloriously imperfect, to be enough just as we are? And here's something I really want you to hear. Grace isn't weakness. It's not about a lack of character or spine. It's not admitting defeat. It's actually one of the strongest, most powerful choices we can make. Because when we give ourselves grace, we're saying, I matter enough to be kind to myself. We're saying, my worth is not tied to my productivity, to my achievements, to my possessions, to my title, my money, my body, or anyone else's expectations. Grace is like a soft landing place for all those moments when not enough feels too loud, too much, too heavy. Grace is the gentle, loving whisper that says, you're doing your best, and your best is enough. Even saying the word grace, it's a beautiful sound. It's one of my favorite things in the world. Okay, let's move on to H, our last letter. H is for hold space for both acceptance and growth. And this is where magic becomes alchemy. Because somehow we've been taught that it has to be one or the other. Either we accept ourselves exactly as we are, or we strive to grow, to be better, to improve. But what if we could do both? Remember when I said I wanted to give you both roots and wings? This is exactly what I meant. We can be deeply rooted in our own enoughness, in our own worth, and still reach for the stars, reach for more. We can love ourselves exactly as we are and want to expand, to learn, to grow, to become more of who we dream of being. It's like nature. Think about it. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it, because a tree doesn't hate its current height while it's growing taller. It doesn't criticize its leaves while they're changing colors. It simply is, without judgment, while also constantly growing, changing, evolving. That's what holding space for both acceptance and growth looks like. And when we really get this, when we understand that growth doesn't mean we're not enough now, and acceptance doesn't mean we're giving up on growth, that's when everything shifts. And I'm talking gorgeous, seismic shifts. That's when we can finally breathe. That's when we can say, I am enough, exactly as I am, and I'm excited to see who I'm becoming, to feel who I'm becoming. This isn't about finding some perfect balance. It's about embracing the beautiful mess of being human, of being beautifully, exquisitely flawed. It's about giving ourselves permission to be perfectly imperfect while still dreaming and still reaching, still growing. It's about having roots and wings, grit and grace. It's about acceptance and ambition. It's not an either or, it's an and. Okay, I know I've got to wrap this baby up, but you might be thinking, okay, Lulu, all sounds very beautiful, but how do I actually live it? Well, I want to give you something simple but really powerful to try. And it's not another item on your to-do list, but it's just a gentle invitation. I call it an enough moment. And here's how it works. Once a day, just once. Okay, you overachievers out there, you can do it more than once if you want, but just requires once a day. I want you to catch yourself in a moment when you do feel enough. For me, it's when I'm sipping my morning coffee and the sun hits my face in just that perfect way. Or maybe for you, it's when you make your colleague laugh during a stressful meeting. Maybe it's when you choose to close your laptop at 6 instead of pushing through for another few hours. Those moments are everywhere, but we are so busy looking for what's missing, what's not enough, that we often miss them completely. And here's the thing, you don't need to force these moments or go hunting for them. Just notice when they show up. When you catch an enough moment, take 3 deep breaths. That's it. 3 breaths to really feel it in your body and say to yourself, right now, in this moment, I am enough. The more you notice those enough moments, the more of them you will find to notice and appreciate. And if you don't catch any of these moments some days, well, that's where the G in our framework comes in. Give yourself grace. Because even the practice of looking for these moments starts to shift something inside us. But be mindful. If you have a day when you don't find an enough moment, do not judge yourself, your life, or your process. Give yourself grace. These practices are powerful, and at the same time, we really need to be mindful not to use them as tests of how good we are at this stuff or how good we are at growth, at personal development. It's just a practice to support you, not another thing for you to use to judge yourself. So be careful with it. Just be mindful. Because I really mean it. It can be tricky. It can be tricky not to judge yourself, even with these practices. And if you find yourself doing that, grace. Let's make grace our best friend in 2025. Grace knows we are enough. Grace knows you are enough. And now I'm going to say spontaneously, please give me grace, because I know that we are a little over time. So we've covered a lot today, from discovering our enough framework to finding precious enough moments. And you know what? I think we might be onto something with this whole Enough-uary thing. Maybe we should make it official. Put it right there between January and February, a whole month dedicated to remembering our enoughness. Or even better, make it our personal theme for 2025 and beyond. Enough. You are enough. But here's the real magic and sparkle. We don't need to wait for a special month or a perfect moment to practice this. Every single day gives us new opportunities to embrace where we are, notice our stories, observe without judgment, understand our patterns and triggers, give ourselves grace, and hold space for both acceptance and growth. Oh, and yes, just quick reminder for those of you who missed last week's episode, there's a heap of magic there too. Love letters, permission slips, glimmers. I just love glimmers. So go back and have a listen if you missed it. So at the beginning of the episode, I told you about my moment in my Teams meeting where that sneaky, cheeky, not enough voice showed up. Well, I'm going to let you in on something. that voice still shows up sometimes, and that's completely okay. The difference is now I have tools, I have awareness, I have this framework, and most importantly, I have grace as my best friend, and I take grace wherever I go. So beauties, as we continue through this deliciously messy journey of life, remember, you don't need a new month, a new year, or a new you. You just need to remember that you are enough, exactly as you are, right here, right now. And you get to grow, to dream, to reach for more. And you get to have fun along the way and laugh your heart out. Because damn it, you are so worth it. And let's share grace with others and let as many people as possible begin to feel their enoughness. And you can do it by sharing this episode with them. Send this episode to the people you love and care about. And I always love hearing from you, so reach out to me. And as always, what comes from the heart reaches the heart. And today, like every other day, this comes straight from my heart to yours. And it comes with the reminder that you are and always have been enough.